On the Great American Read books that I have read, number 10 is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon in 2003. Well, this is the first book on the list that was released within my lifetime, and I actually did read it when it first came out. I was 19 years old, just headed into college, and I'd recently gotten back into reading by myself all the time because I'd remembered how much fun it could be, and this book was a decent part of just reminding me of that, and it's continued to this day, so thank you for that. And the interesting thing about all of it is this book takes on some very tricky subject matter, which it's incredibly easy to get wrong and be horribly offensive because it's narrated by a kid named Christopher who has some form of autism spectrum just designation to him. The book makes a very smart decision to not ever actually specify what it is he has, which is introduced to us very neatly, where the first scene is him coming across the dead body of his neighbor's dog, which has been like killed with a gardening tool, and his narration of that goes, the dog, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, the dog was dead, and I was pretty sure it was because it had been stabbed with the tool that was still impaled in it, and it wasn't because of some other cause like cancer. And that really gives you the cliff notes of how to understand how this kid's mind works, because things that to you, for lack of a better word, regular thinking person would use and just come to these conclusions automatically, he has to go through all these kind of steps to get to the same thing. But that doesn't mean he's any less smart. It just means that he takes a bit longer to get there and he does it in his own way. And that is very key to our actually being able to get on board with this whole thing beyond just being what could have been easily a kind of freak show. Just check out the Netflix series Atypical if you want to see how wrong this kind of thing can go. But Mark Haddon, who, as far as I can tell, didn't really have any kind of background with people with this kind of affliction to them, and he does a great job nevertheless in getting inside this kid's head, keeping things consistent with how his mind works, and building a great story around it, which, after all, is what any book can hope to do. And he does it all at the same time in what was considered his first book for adults, even though it was later marketed for children and adults, and it's done very well with both of them. And he's mostly a children's author, and this was going to some really uncharted territory for him, and he pulled it off. And I've kind of been surprised that he hasn't tried it more after he did so well to begin with, but maybe he just figured that he's never going to top this thing, so he might as well just go back to what he does usually, that he's also pretty good at. But whatever the reason is, we still have this one book, which is a really great character exploration that never lets you forget just how fortunate you may be if you don't have this kind of thing yourself, while also still not being offensive to people who do have it, and the like making them feel like this kind of terrifying other, because Christopher is a very sympathetic character throughout. You like him a lot, even if he can be kind of like abrasive with just how blunt he is, because he doesn't really have a concept of how people's emotions can affect what they say and what they do, and so he takes everything at just absolute face value. And part of that is just this very rigid view of morality. People who do bad things are just automatically evil, and he does snap out of that by the end, but it takes quite a while, and it's completely earned when he does, because it involves him going on this long trip by himself that even like many um, just people without this kind of thing of his age would have a hard time dealing with. And so you really are impressed by him being able to do it, and the narration fully goes into just how difficult it is, and so you believe that it is this hard thing for him to do, and you're rooting for him throughout the whole thing. And the interesting thing beyond all that is it's initially set up as a mystery, but you find the answer halfway through, and it's kind of not that much of a surprise, even if I didn't really predict who it was. But it also doesn't really matter at all. And the only other story I've seen pull that off, like at least anywhere near this well, is The Singing Detective, the miniseries. So it's really just drills into you when that happens that this really was about the characters all along. And if you were in it just for the mystery, you were in it for the wrong thing. But even if you were, odds are you bought into the characters along the way, so you still don't feel cheated by that. And the payoff for just this personality is very well worth it and worth sticking into the end. And it hits you very hard emotionally, even if the narration can't fully convey that, just because of what you can bring to the table with your own thoughts on the situation. And that is a tricky thing to pull off. Believe me, I've tried. And uh, I'm still really impressed to this day that Mark Haddon was able to do this, just going outside of his comfort zone, doing whatever popped into his head, this weird idea he had for a mystery that's not really a mystery, and that features a character really like none other you'll read. So you may not want to really pick this one up just based on the oddball premise alone, but I think just about anyone will find something they can emphasize with this anyway. So if you haven't, check it out. Maybe it'll be a bit too weird for you to really get into, but it's definitely worth a shot. Next time, we go to another relatively recent book about conspiracies and murders and all that good stuff. But is it really any good with the Da Vinci Code?